I'm Amy Clipston, and I'm the author of A Heart Set Free. In order to live a life of faith in my daily work, I always like to think about something one of my Amish friends told me. We were once talking, and she said to always keep your eyes on Jesus. So I try to remember that every day, whether I'm in the office or whether I'm working on a book. I always try to keep that in my mind and try to emulate things that Jesus would do as far as how I treat people and also just how I do my work. So I always say that writing is in my DNA. When I was in elementary school, I used to carry around notebooks and write really silly stories that I would only share with a friend. And that became a stress reliever and a hobby for me. But as I grew older, I realized that I actually wanted to write books and see my name on a cover. Not only did I want to write books, but I was drawn to Christian fiction since I am a lifelong Christian. And I know many people say that they have a ministry, and I feel that writing books that are inspiring and touch people, that's my ministry. A Heart Set Free is an Amish suspense book, and it's about Renee Mast, who is a young Amish woman who lives in Ohio. She receives word that her grandmother, who is in Pennsylvania, passed away and left her her farm. So while Renee is in Pennsylvania taking care of her late grandmother's affairs, she also wants to find out the truth about why her father insisted that she and her mother leave that community 20 years ago. And while she's living at the farm and going through all the information about her grandmother, there's someone in the community who is harassing her and leaving her notes asking her to leave. And there's also a really handsome farmhand whom she might fall in love with. A Heart Set Free is my first suspense book, and it's also an Amish book. I've been writing Amish books since 2007, and my father was a German immigrant, and I grew up in New Jersey, and I had visited Lancaster. So I've always been intrigued by the Amish. I also have an Amish friend who lives in Lancaster County on a dairy farm. She has 7 children and she has a few grandchildren. So I was very excited to not only write another Amish book, but to write my very first suspense book. And I was brand new to suspense. I was actually very intimidated. But once I started thinking about Renee's story about a young Amish woman who comes back to Pennsylvania to find out more about her hometown, which she left 20 years ago, the pieces just started falling into place, and it was really fun to write. I always say that some books are more difficult to write than others. At times I feel like I'm pushing the characters through the story, but then there are those really magical times where the characters tell me the story, and A Heart Set Free was one of those magical kind of books where once I sat down to write, the characters just came to life. Renee, who is the heroine, and Jerome, who is the hero, they started telling me the story, and it was a situation where I felt like I couldn't type fast enough. And I just look back on when I was writing this book and I just smile because everything came together, and I have to say it's one of my favorites. My favorite line from the book is, "Don't let your grief consume you. God has forgiven you, and you need to forgive yourself." And that's really the theme of the story, that not only does God forgive us when we make mistakes, but we also need to forgive ourselves. And I think that Jerome, the hero, is the character that really learns that lesson, because some things happened to him in his past that he's been carrying around that guilt for a long time, and he learns throughout the story that he needs to give that up. He needs to forgive himself. He needs to move on. Yes, he's made mistakes, but no matter what, God forgives us and wants us to move on and have a better life. I think we all need inspiring fiction because we're all going through something in our lives. And I can say just from my own experience, my husband's been through 2 kidney transplants. We've been through some really hard times, and whenever we're walking through those difficult times, we need to remember that we're not alone. And I've heard from readers in the past that have said that my books have either helped them through a hard time, it's helped them find their faith, and I'm just grateful that God uses me that way, because we've all been there. We all need that little reminder that even when you think things are just falling apart and nothing's going to get better, you're never alone. I always hope that someone gets lost in the story, forgets their problems, their worries, and just is there for the ride. I always say that my books are about people going through a hard time and finding love along the way. And I really want my readers to feel inspired, feel hope, and then walk away with a smile on their face, knowing that no matter what, you're not alone, and just enjoy the time that you're reading the book, and just remember that God is always with us. I always try to remember Philippians 4:13, which is, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I remember for a long time, I mentioned that my husband's had 2 kidney transplants, and when we were in the thick of things and hoping to find a match for him for his second transplant, I actually had that verse stuck to my monitor at work. And whenever I was just so frustrated and down and trying not to lose myself in all the worry, I would look at that scripture. And so I try to remember that in my day-to-day if I'm having a bad day, or I just try to keep that in the back of my mind when I'm writing my books, when I'm writing my inspirational stories, just to remember to remind readers of that too. So I would say that's definitely a verse that resonates in me, and I hope always resonates in my books. I hope readers will know that I hope that I take them on a fun journey with a great story, especially with this book, A Heart Set Free. It's a suspense book, so there's lots of twists and turns, but also no matter what, in the end, they'll be left with an inspirational message that reminds them that to hold on to their faith, especially in the hard times. And also, I hope they enjoy it and they want to read another one of my books. So I first started writing Amish fiction back in 2007, and I always like to say that Amish fiction kind of chose me, because when I made the decision that I wanted to write an Amish story, doors opened, and I had a friend that I met through an online writers group who grew up in Lancaster, and she actually said to me, "You need to go visit my mom. She has an Amish friend." So my mom and I drove up to Lancaster County and stayed with my friend's mother, and then we went to visit my Amish friend who lives in Gordonville. And I remember the first time I met her, I sat in her kitchen with my little notebook, and I was terrified to ask her any question, but I soon realized that she was the sweetest, most down-to-earth, easiest person to talk to. And I believe that was back in 2009 or 2010. And we're still friends today. I leave her a message and she'll call me back. She answers all my questions. Nothing is off limits. We've been on many adventures. I've taken her shopping. I've taken her to lunch. One day I took her 4 sons and my 2 sons out to spend a day at a lake. And she even invited me to come to an Amish service, which was a real honor. And so as far as our friendship, we talk. Actually, I just spoke to her a few days ago, and we'll just get on the phone, talk about our families. And when I was writing A Heart Set Free, I actually reached out to her to ask her one burning question. When Renee comes from Ohio to stay at her late grandmother's farm in Lancaster County, my editor had asked the question if it would be okay for Renee to be staying in her grandmother's house and the farmhand to be staying in his little house on the same property without a chaperone. So I came up with an idea that Jerome's sister would say, "Hey, I'm going to be your chaperone and move in and stay with Renee." So I called my friend and asked her, and she said, "That's actually a very good idea. They would need a chaperone." So she's always there to answer any question. I actually dedicated the book to her. and said, "Thank you for always answering my questions, no matter how small or silly," and that is the truth.